Feels like it's been a minute since we had class. It's been a minute, hasn't it? So tonight we're going to pick back up right where we left off. And we've been working through the end times in chronological order. And we've made it all the way through into the tribulation period. We've worked our way through the events right at the beginning of the tribulation. We've worked our way through the seal judgments. And in the last class, we started working through the trumpet judgments. And we're going to pick right up where we left off. The one thing I am going to do, though, just to refresh our memories, we didn't make it all the way through the trumpets last time. So if I recall correctly, we made it through the first four, and I'm going to review those four. I didn't ask you. We're going to...
Poor Stephanie. Poor Stephanie. We got pride.
Thank you for keeping me on track, Miss Taryn. But we're going to review the first four. You guys are troublemakers. Then I'll finish in more depth the last three. And if you remember, those last three are called the woes, the three woes. We'll talk about them in more depth. I don't want to confuse anyone, especially if you weren't here last week. So I'll probably go a little bit quicker through the first four and maybe five, since Taryn says we've already talked about that. But I want to review so we're not kind of starting right in the middle. But we're going to start in Revelation chapter 9. In this first trumpet judgment, and if you remember that with the trumpets, the seal judgments were in large part the activity of the Antichrist and his impact on mankind. There is a shift when we get to the trumpet judgments. The trumpet judgments are related to God using natural causes to exercise his judgment and his wrath. So there's a shift in the nature of these judgments. There's a shift in the intensity of these judgments, and they just keep snowballing the more you work through these. And if you remember the seal judgments, as Jesus is opening the seals on the scroll, that seventh seal, the trumpet judgments spring out of that seventh seal. And it's the same will be true when we get to the seventh trumpet judgment. The bowl judgments that follow that will spring out of that. So it makes it, I call this a chronological order, but it makes it hard to define a clear chronology because there's some overlap in these judgments. And because of that, some events are blurred. They may overlap. I explained last class that when you get to the midpoint, which will be our next class, we're going to talk about the events in the midpoint of the tribulation period, that different teachers, different scholars interpret that midpoint at different points in these judgments. And I'll share with you as we work through these what some of the popular opinions are. I'll tell you what I think. But the important thing to remember is that we are working, the trumpets follow the seals, the bowls will follow the trumpets, but we are working through that 7-year period, and there's a clear-cut midpoint. And the second half of that tribulation is called the Great Tribulation. We're not there yet, but we're getting really close. So this is still chronological. We're still working in order, but we're going to start with this first trumpet, Revelation chapter 8, if you would turn there to verse 7. The first sounded, this is the first trumpet, and there came hail and fire. Remember I said this is God using nature, so hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all of the green grass was burnt up. So in this first trumpet, you see clearly that shift I'm talking about. This isn't due to the Antichrist. This is hail and fire falling from the sky, and you see the grass and the trees and the plants burned up, right? We talked in the last class when we discussed this about the impact this is going to have on just the ecology of the planet. And I want you to think for a second about, it says a third of the trees. What do trees do for the environment? They produce oxygen, right? Does anyone remember the forest fires that were in Canada? It blew me away that I could step outside my door. I went for a run one day, and the smoke from Canada was in Ohio, and it affected my ability to run in Ohio. So I want you to think about that, because in this judgment, what you're seeing is, again, the trees, the grass, a third of which being burned up, all the green grass, but this stuff is burnt up, and it's going to impact our air quality, it's going to impact the ecology, and what this suggests is a huge impact on our environment. So much so that some scholars say that this is likely caused by a nuclear attack. Now, I'm not saying it is, all right? In fact, even if it is, one thing I want to point out here, that even if a nuclear weapon plays some kind of role in this judgment, that it is caused by divine agency. This isn't a random thing that man causes with a nuclear weapon. This is God's wrath. And it's being caused, if you remember, Jesus Christ is the only one qualified. We talked in great length as to why he's the only one qualified to open the seals. He opens the seventh seal. The seventh seal springs forth the trumpets, and this first trumpet is this judgment that we're seeing here. This is being caused by divine agency. This is God's wrath. This is intentional. He's doing it. And again, I always feel like I need to offer you this disclaimer that this judgment is not meant for you. This judgment is a judgment on primarily the wicked unbelievers and Israel, who rejected their Messiah. Christians, if you remember, we've talked at great length, have already been raptured at this point. So none of these judgments should scare you at this point. This is not meant for you, but we're reading what it says, and it says that a third of the trees and all the green grass are burnt up. So it is a natural judgment, right? If you look back at Exodus chapter 9 real quick, there is some similarities between this judgment and judgments that God has wrought in the past. In Exodus 9, starting in verse 22, what you see is the judgment on Egypt. And it says, "Now the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky." This is Exodus 9:22, "so that hail may fall on the land of Egypt, on man and on beast, and on every plant of the field throughout the land of Egypt." Moses stretched out his staff toward the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down on the earth, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So it's a very similar judgment. So it's similar, but it's on a much larger scale. And most of these judgments that we're going to read about in the trumpet judgments are akin to judgments we've seen in the past, if you read Exodus. But they're not limited to one country. This is a worldwide scale judgment, and it's falling on a large area. So it's similar, but yet it's more grand, right? So that's the first trumpet. The second trumpet, if you go back to Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. "The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the creatures died, or a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed." So in this judgment, We've already seen land affected, trees and grass. Now we're seeing the oceans. And in this judgment, this big land mass is described as a great fiery mountain plummets into the sea. And maybe this is a large mountain, maybe it's a meteor or an asteroid of some kind, but it falls into the ocean, and the results are very literal. It says to us that a third of the sea life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. And if you remember in the last class, I told you that right now, today, at any given time, there's approximately 105,000 ships on our oceans floating around doing whatnot. And that's not counting the small little vessels. That's the large merchant registered vessels and military vessels. There's 105,000. So when you think of a third of those being destroyed at one time, you're 30 to 40,000 vessels at once. A third of the marine life in the oceans. So again, what's going to be the impact of that? What's going to happen? I joked last class that your Amazon package is going to be late. If you ordered something from Temu, it's not coming. You're right. It's hit or miss anyway. But after this happens, it is not coming, right? So, but think about this, the impact. You know, I joke about Amazon and Temu, but think about the impact on commerce. 30,000 vessels at once in trade. That's a huge impact. It's going to have a huge economic impact, right? It's going to have a huge ecological implication. If you think about a third of the marine life dying, the ramifications are big between these ships and this marine life being all destroyed at once. This is a huge escalation in the judgment. Now couple that with what we just read that happens with all the grass and a third of the trees, things are getting dicey at this point. And then not only do these happen in sequence, they build on one another. So you're not recovering from the first trumpet and then the second trumpet's happening. So this is a big impact on the world. Computers will die suddenly. The third trumpet, that was a success. Revelation 8, 10, and 11. And again, I'm working through these first four kind of quick because we have talked about them. But Revelation 8, 10, and 11 says, the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of waters. The name of the star is called Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. So in this judgment, we've seen the green grass, the trees, we've seen the ocean life. Now we're seeing the fresh water impacted. This star, which is called wormwood. Now wormwood in the Old Testament is a word that just means bitter. Wormwood was a root that could be made into a poison. And if you ate it, it would make you sick. In this case, this star that falls is named wormwood. Its results are the same. It's going to taint the water so that when you drink it, you are sickened or maybe even killed. And it tells in this judgment, it says that a third of the waters became wormwood or bitter. They're not safe to drink. They're tainted. So now you've had the grass, the trees, the ocean life, and now the fresh life. And someone asked in the last class, is this the moment that the Euphrates River will dry up that's associated with Revelation? This isn't that moment. That's later in Revelation. Now, it may have some sort of cause and effect, I'm not sure, but this isn't quite that moment. We're not there yet. But this this judgment, this wormwood that falls, taints the water and makes it undrinkable. Now, I drink coffee from the time I get up to the time I go to bed, or Diet Coke. I rarely drink water, but I'm told it's essential for life. Imagine a third of the drinking. Sabrina's like, I don't think you need water. They tell me you do. But think a third of it, right? Now, again, what are some of the impacts? Health. A lot of civilization is built around these freshwater sources. If you go back and you look at waterways, where do we tend to build towns? Near water, for a reason, right? So a source of life for people, I mean, we eat fish. You're not going to be able to eat the food out of those waters. You're not going to be able to drink those waters. It's going to have a huge impact on the daily life of the people that inhabit this planet. And wormwood, just the phrase wormwood, this root, is associated with judgment even in the Old Testament. I told you a lot of these judgments are reminiscent of judgments that we've seen in the past. Turn, if you would, to Deuteronomy chapter 29. Deuteronomy 29, verse 18. It says, so that there will not be among you a man or woman or family or tribe whose heart turns away today from the Lord our God to go and serve the gods of those nations, that there will not be among you a root bearing poisonous fruit in wormwood. What he's saying is there will not be among one of you that's not judged. This wormwood is associated with God's judgment. And that's exactly what's happening in Revelation. This is God's judgment. It's not a random star falling. The news media might portray it that way when it happens, but that's not what's going on. This is calculated, it's intentional, and it is meant to judge the wicked. This is God's judgment through nature tainting these waters. So that's the third trumpet. If you go back and you read Jeremiah, that's simply another reference to this being a judgment. Exodus, we looked at in the last class. Again, it's very reminiscent to the judgments that fell on Egypt. I don't know. I'm going to give up. Resume slideshow. I need a tech assistant. I tried to get Rebecca, and she said no. I tried to hire you to be my tech assistant. You said no. You guys are mouthy.
So are you.
See what happens when we miss Bible study for a couple of weeks. It's all bad. So the fourth trumpet, and I don't care what they say, when I get done with the fourth trumpet, we'll be caught up. The fourth trumpet, Revelation 8:12, it says, the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. So this judgment talks about the darkening, right, of the sun and of the moon. And we've talked a couple events that could happen that might cause this, right? It could be caused by the smoke and the soot in the air from the previous judgments are just going to darken things. It could be, and when it says it's a third were struck, right? So it doesn't shine for a third of it. It could be a third in duration. It could be a third in intensity. But the end result is a third less light on the planet. It will be daylight savings time to the extreme. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm tired of it. Right? The impact, again, what are some of the, just think daylight savings time. What's some of the impact during the winter months when it gets dark at 5 o'clock?
No less sunscreen.
What? Is that the summertime? I don't know.
But the impact, a lot of it, I think, could do with the previous trumpet where the star fell, knocking the Earth out of its orbit.
Sure.
So it's going to have a totally different orbit.
Yeah, if it changes that orbit even slightly, it's going to impact the length of the time, right? Which is going to impact, if that's the case, that's going to impact the tides in the oceans, the length of the day, everything, right? So it's any one of these things could cause it. What was you going to say? You're making that up, right?
No.
Chickens don't lay eggs as much. Wow. I mean, just think about things like seasonal depression. I mean, that's a thing, right?
Yep.
Tracy? Weather patterns are going to change. It's going to be cold. It's going to be like kind of like living in Alaska, no matter where you're at. I mean, it's going to have a huge impact on the life of the planet, right? Jesus in Mark 13:24, if you turn to that real quick. I'm sorry? Everyone's going to look like Gollum. We're all going to be pale. Taryn said there'll be less sunscreen needed. That's because we're all going to be pale. We won't need sunscreen. But Mark 13, verse 24. Jesus says, but in those days after the tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. He prophesies, right? He says the stars will be falling from heaven and the powers that are in the heavens will be shaken. We know from what's said in that gospel that these events are going to take place. It's playing out exactly the way it's prophesied. There's stars falling from the sky. The light is dimmed. And the impact again, now add, again, these judgments don't happen on an island. So you have to think of the accumulation of all of them together. It's a bad time to be under God's wrath in this moment. And it's only going to go from here to more intense. So the next judgments that we look at are they're called out specifically as the three woes. And what that signifies, I'll show you why I say that here in a second, but what that signifies is a dramatic increase in intensity. Now, because of that separation, most scholars will tell you it's at this moment, at the end of the fourth trumpet, where we start the fifth trumpet, that we hit the midpoint and we work from the first 3.5 years of the tribulation into the second 3.5 years. That's the Great Tribulation. Most will say that. Now, there's others that differ. Again, I'm not really concerned with where you exactly place it, right? The biggest thing I want you to understand is we're moving from bad to worse in every way imaginable. So the next, if I can do this without destroying anything. I don't know. If Rebecca had helped me, this would be all better. Okay. So this is an image you haven't seen before. This is new. But I want you to turn to Revelation 8:13, and it's going to depict the image that you're seeing there. And I find this whole passage kind of interesting. But Revelation 8:13 says, then I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. So there's this break, and what John sees is an eagle. And this eagle is flying around saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. Eagles don't normally do this, correct? Right. So there's something different about this particular eagle. It's flying around in mid-heaven Just to clarify, mid-heaven is like high noon, right? If you're going mid, boom, it's the highest point in the sky. That's why everyone can see it. It says this eagle is flying around with a loud voice saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And I want to ask you, does anyone have a translation that says something other than eagle? What's it say? Angel. What'd yours say? Terror. He saw a flying terror. And yours says he saw a flying eagle. Angel. I'm sorry. The angel is the translation out of the King James. And I want to explain to you why there's a difference. There seems, is it an angel or is it an eagle? It could be a little bit of both. But there's a reason the King James says angel. And there's a little video on the Bible study page on Facebook where I explain the different translations of Scripture. The King James is not a bad translation, so don't take me as saying that. But it was authored at a time when there were less original manuscripts available. Do you remember a thing called the Dead Sea Scrolls? So the King James was written and translated prior to the discovery of multiple original manuscripts. So when they translated it, the manuscripts they had on hand said angel. So the King James put angel. They then found multiple other manuscripts. Those manuscripts said eagle. The more reliable and older manuscripts say eagle. So the King James made the best of what they had at the time. They said angel. So what's likely happened is the two words, the word that means angel and the word that means eagle, I'm not going to try to pronounce them because I'll butcher them. They're very close in the original Greek. So it could have been a miscopy by a translator. It could have also been a translator who was trying to be helpful because he just saw an eagle saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and he thought, this has got to be something more than an eagle, right? Either way, it's not a huge issue because, like I told you, this is not a normal eagle. It's doing stuff that eagles don't typically do. There's another that the word. Maybe I will try to pronounce it. Let me see if I can even find it. The word that is translated as eagle is aetos. A-E-T-O-S. Aetos. Turn to Luke 17 for me. Because Luke uses the same word, but it's translated differently. Luke 17:37. Now, this isn't a passage where Jesus says 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. In verse 37 of Luke 17, and answering, they said to him, "Where, Lord?" And he said to them, "Where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered." That word vultures is the same word that's translated as eagle in Revelation. What do you think of when you see a vulture circling? I'm sorry? Something's dead, right? That's when I know, like, those people that are in Run for God with me know that I'm really slow. And on some days when it's like really hot, the last thing I want to see when I look up is a vulture. But I've seen it and I thought it's time to take a break. But it means something, right? If you see a vulture in the distance, something is dead. A vulture is like a harbinger of destruction or doom or death, right? So angel is messenger. So this eagle is bringing a message, like an angel. That's what angels do. They bring messages. So that's why I'm telling you, this isn't that big a difference if it says eagle or angel. However, in this passage, what the eagle is saying is, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's a harbinger of bad, terrible things coming. These last 3 trumpets, these 3 woes are bad. They're so bad, there's 3 woes. And you will see in other places in Scripture, you will see two woes paired together quite often. All right. Revelation 18, it says, "Woe, woe to the great city Babylon." Revelation, later in the same chapter, it says, "Woe, woe to the great city." Ezekiel said, "Woe, woe to you, declares the Lord God." This eagle is saying, "Woe, woe, woe." A third woe. And it made me think of, this is stupid, but I made myself laugh yesterday. Did anyone watch A Christmas Carol over the holidays? Remember when Flick sticks his tongue to the pole? Why did he do it? He was triple dog dared because there was a breach in etiquette. They jumped right over the double dog dare and went straight to triple dog dare, right? Triple dog's worse. So he had to do it. This is a triple woe. He jumps right over double woe, straight to triple woe. It's bad news. So it's simply telling us that what is about to happen is unprecedented. That's why people will say that that's the midpoint. That's where we start to transcend into the Great Tribulation. We're at that midpoint where things start getting really, really bad. These woes are a triple woe. So I'm afraid to touch it. So this is the fifth trumpet, or the first woe. And it starts in Revelation 9. I'm going to slow down a bit because we're starting to get into new territory here in our study. I'm going to have security escort Taryn out. She's up here heckling me. Revelation 9, verses 1 through 12 reads this way. It says, "Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them as the scorpions of the earth have power. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a man. And in those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. The appearance of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads prepared to be crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were like the teeth of lions. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tail is their power to hurt men for 5 months. They have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he has the name Apollyon. The first woe is past. Behold, 2 woes are still remaining after these things. So in this passage, we see a star falling from heaven. And this star falling from heaven has a role it plays, but the star is interpreted in a couple of different ways. Some people see this word fallen, and they go straight to, this is a fallen angel. This is a bad guy, right? But what's this star doing? It's releasing. It has a key to this pit, this abyss, right? Okay. So this angel falls, right? Now, if it's a bad angel, if it's a fallen angel, maybe it's fallen like Satan. I don't think that's what we're seeing here at all. This angel if you read this passage, is carrying out God's instructions. Remember, this is God. This is divinely ordered. The fifth trumpet sounds, and this angel, this star, falls from heaven with a key to the bottomless pit. Now, this pit, this abyss, is the same one that's referenced in a really cool passage in Luke chapter 8. Turn to Luke 8. Luke 8, 26 through 31. Passage reads this way. It says, "Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he came out," he being Jesus, "when he came out onto the land, he was met by a man from the city who was possessed with demons, and who had not put on any clothing for a long time, and who was not living in a house, but in the tombs. Seeing Jesus, he cried out and fell before him and said in a loud voice, 'What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me.' For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For it had seized him many times, and he was bound with chains and shackles and kept under guard, and yet he would break his bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. And Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Legion,' for many demons had entered him. They were imploring him not to command them to go away into the abyss." They didn't want to go to the abyss. They were terrified of being cast away to this abyss. That's the same abyss we're reading about in Revelation. Now, this abyss isn't hell. This is a temporary holding cell, if you would. It's a temporary place of banishment and punishment for these fallen demons. These demons didn't want to go there. They were terrified of it. If you remember right, what happens to them? If you keep reading that passage, they get cast into swine. It's a neat passage. But they would rather be cast into swine and jump over a cliff than go to this abyss, because it's a place of torment and punishment. So they beg Jesus, "Don't send me there." This is the same abyss that when we finally make it all the way to Revelation 20, that Satan will be cast into temporarily. It's a temporary place of punishment for these demons and these fallen angels that had fallen under God's judgment, right? Now, here's why I say that this fallen star, this fallen angel that's falling down and opening it is a good guy, not a bad guy. The bad guys don't have keys to their own prison. That's bad. That's a bad way to run a prison. Trust me. Chad, am I right? It's a bad idea, right? It doesn't work. So this it's fallen in place. It's just simply telling us he's falling out of the sky. It's not meant to be a theological designation that he's a fallen angel. It's just saying he's falling out of the sky with the key, because he's been given the authority to unlock the abyss and let out some things. And what we see him let out, right? If you go back to Revelation, is he lets out these wild-looking. Let me read the description. Go back to Revelation 9. I've just got to read it directly out of the text because it's wilder than any paraphrase I could give. Is it verse 7? Revelation 9, starting in 7. Thank you. It says, the appearance of these locusts. So their locust-like creatures was like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. You can kind of see them in this image. Now, that's not my image. Again, remember, I have ChatGPT. I say, just give me an image of what this would look like. That's its rendering, right? They're kind of terrifying. But it says they had hair like the hair of women, teeth like the teeth of lions, breastplates like breastplates of iron. The sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, of many horses rushing to battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tails is the power to hurt men for 5 months. These are terrifying creatures. And this angel with the key unlocks it and lets them out because they are the next judgment. They're the next step in the wrath. They're the first woe. And there's all kinds of interpretations on what we're actually seeing here, or what John is actually seeing and trying to describe to us. One that I think is kind of neat, I don't know if I agree with it, but I just read it the other day. Have you seen on the news all these drones that the military uses? I can't remember the exact number, maybe someone will, but the operation we just carried out, Venezuela, there were a lot of aircraft involved in it, but the military used a lot of drones, these unmanned flying drones. And this commentary kind of equated these drones with what we're seeing described here. Breastplates like breastplates of iron. The sound of their wings was like that of chariots. Drones they have a hum to them, right? I could get on board with that, I think, probably that interpretation. That's not what I'm seeing here, but it's an interpretation. But here's what I will tell you. Look at verse 11. I've heard other people say it's maybe helicopters. It's some kind of like an Apache helicopter-looking craft. But look at verse 11. They have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon or Abaddon, and in the Greek he has the name Apollyon. These creatures, these locust-like creatures, come out of the abyss where they're temporarily held until the time God says release them for this trumpet, this fifth trumpet, and they have a king. Helicopters don't have kings. Drones don't have kings. These creatures, these locust-like creatures, have a king. He has a name. It's Abaddon. What Abaddon in Greek means, in Hebrew, and what Apollyon in Greek means is destroyer. This is a very specific fallen angel who's been imprisoned in this pit. He's powerful enough that they consider him the king of the pit. These creatures that come out of it consider him their king. But yet, they're doing what the only true God wants them to do in this moment. God is in control of this, not Apollyon. God is exercising his judgment. These creatures are carrying it out. Exodus 10, 12, 20. Turn there if you would, because I keep telling you that these judgments are very similar to the judgments we see in the Old Testament. And this one is again, similar. Now, locusts are considered parallel with judgment all throughout the Old Testament. They swarm to the point that you can't count them. They're innumerable. They have a terrible impact on the crops. But Exodus 10, starting in verse 12, we see a very specific judgment. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up to the land of Egypt and eat every plant of the land, even all that the hail has left. So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord directed an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. The locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled in all the territory of Egypt. They were so numerous, there had never been so many locusts, nor would there ever be so many again. These locusts that we're seeing in Revelation are like these locusts of Exodus on crack, on steroids, right? These are wild, demonic-like beings. I think that's what we're seeing. They have a king called Abaddon, and they're exercising judgment, just like the locusts from the Old Testament, only to a much higher degree of destruction and calamity that they cause, right? So there's different ways to interpret that. I tend to take Scripture literally. And when I see this, I think John is trying very hard to describe what he's seeing. I don't know how terrifying it was for him to see it, but I think that's terrifying enough. And it doesn't come close to what he saw, right? So this is an escalation in the judgment, and it's just the first of 3 woes. There's 2 more to come. And because Taryn wouldn't stop talking, I'm going to have to talk about the other 2 woes next week. We've got 2 more to go, and they get worse from here. Yes. No. We'll start with, we're all caught up now, so next week we'll start with the 2nd woe and the 3rd woe, and then I want to talk about the midpoint of the tribulation, because there's some people we haven't talked about that is important that we kind of put in perspective. Pam? The seal? Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. If you back up in that passage that we just read, as we're I can't even imagine.
Yeah, they're going to completely mutilate themselves, but they can't die.
Yeah. Imagine wanting nothing more than to be dead and not be able to make that happen. I can't. This is the kind of torment that these people are going to go through. But when you talk about the 144,000, we know that they're literally sealed. God's evangelists, that He sealed, and he said the Antichrist cannot hurt them because they're called for His purposes, right? There's other passages that say that you become a Christian, you're sealed in the Holy Spirit, right? So, any believer, and we've already seen that there's believers, that those 144,000 evangelicals or evangelists and the 2 witnesses are going to convert people. We've read the passages of the martyrs in heaven. Anyone that is in Christ is sealed, right? So that's what we're talking about there. But imagine that torment. That's a level of torment that I don't even want to imagine. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this judgment. And then they continue to get worse from there. So that's the first woe. We'll cover the next 2 next week. And then talk about the midpoint of the tribulation and the abomination of desolation in really good detail. Any questions? Yeah.
So when at the beginning you mentioned about like with trees and things like that. It says the 2nd angel sounded, and it talks about a 3rd of the sea life. That's maybe a little bit of a stretch. Is it just counting like the creatures itself, or are we talking like algae and things of that sort as well? Because algae is going to be more kind of like the trees before.
Yeah, when I think about the scope of the judgment, I think it probably counts both. Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Any other questions or comments? Snide remarks?
So Broncos.
That was a snide remark.
I don't even know who let him in here.